evening. I'd like to thank you very much for having the interest in our democracy. I can't thank you enough. My name is Margaret Weinberger. I'm the president of the Somerset County Federation of Democratic Women. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Federation. Oh, Federation. Honestly, I could not ever do anything that I do without the help of the people who are so kind and generous with their time. Tonight, Cookie is going to be our moderator, and I'll talk a little bit about her when I introduce her. Cynthia is doing some filming for a live stream for Facebook. Ben is setting up so that he can film the event so that we have a record of it. And our candidates, of course, we can't thank them enough, so we should give them a little quick hello and thank you. Now, before we start, one thing that I think we should definitely do is stand up and pledge the flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Thank you. And again, I always ask people at these kinds of events to remember that even though we think we have problems in our country, which we do, and they are solvable, there are people right now without homes, living in refugee camps, people who don't have clean water. We are so blessed that we turn on our tap and clean water comes out. So if you could just close your eyes for about 10 seconds and send as much good energy as you can to the people who are suffering in the world. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for indulging me. Okay, so tonight you'll see we're having our forum, and we do have our moderator tonight. When I decided, with a little bit of help, and actually a lot of help from the Somerset County Democratic Committee, and I encourage all of you to please go online, Google Somerset County Democratic Committee, join their mailing list. Also Google Somerset County Federation of Democratic Women. Join my mailing list. I really want all of you on my mailing list if you're not there already. So please join up. When we all decided that we needed to have a forum, I reached out and asked Cookie if she'd be so kind to be the moderator. She said, yes, I do. I want to be the moderator. So Cookie came up with some questions, and along with some people from other areas in Somerset County, Bob Frawley, I know he's here somewhere, he pitched in and helped us out with a few questions. So I'd like to introduce Cookie, and she's going to explain to the candidates how we're going to run our forum. So, Cookie, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, welcome to the forum, and I'd like to thank the Somerset County Democratic Committee and the Somerset County Federation of Democratic Women, especially Margaret, for allowing me to volunteer for tonight's event. And also a special thanks to a few of my Montgomery committee members who helped me brainstorm and put together a list of questions that we have. So thank you to Abby Grayson, Brett Borowski, Kat Burrell, and our newly elected Montgomery Township Committee woman, Sadat Jaffer, for helping me with the questions. So the forum will be about an hour and a half, an hour 45. The last maybe 30 minutes, when we're done with the forum, you can get to meet candidates, ask them questions. They'll come and introduce themselves to you. Each candidate will get a chance to have an opening statement and a closing statement. And each question, their answers will be limited to 2 minutes. Margaret will be our timer. We have a timer here to make sure that we get the forum going. Because the candidates have a limited amount of time to answer the questions, we gave them the questions in advance about a week ago so that they can prepare and fully articulate the responses tonight. We prepared about 12 questions. I'm not sure that we would be able to go through all of them, but we will try our best to get through all the questions. And lastly, we were asked to let you know that if you could please mute your cell phones, put them on vibrate, and please refrain from applauding till the end of the forum. Okay, so let's begin. Can you start with the opening statements, Peter?
Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank the Somerset County Federation of Democratic Women for hosting this wonderful forum. Again, my name is Peter Jacob. My family came from, and pardon the language, a shithole country back in '86 with just 20 bucks in their pockets, hearts full of hope, and this 6-month-old baby in their arms. I want to share 2 quick stories with you because today we live the American dream. The first, when I was about 9 years old, I saw the plight of poor, homeless, sick children on the streets. My mother said, "There's a nun, raise some money and send it over." 360 days later, I opened up my piggy bank, sent it over, and that December I received a letter from Mother Teresa personally thanking me for it. A few years later, as you may know, my family, we run a small business. My father and I, after a long day of work, we headed over to a board meeting in an under-resourced community. And I remember when we were there, a gentleman from a large corporation with a tie and suit came up to us and in a snarky voice asked, "How did you get this contract?" And I'll always remember my father's response, who said, "We are not greedy." Those experiences invested in me the idea of compassion, integrity, and service to our community, and led me to become a social worker. And as a social worker, if there's something to see, you see it. You see the challenges firsthand every single day because you're on ground zero. But the most challenging day of my vocation came when a young black man holding a baby showed up at my office. He went to college, got a job, started a family, did everything right. And I knew all this about him before he stepped in because he was my friend. We graduated college together. That same year, corporations made a ridiculous amount of profit. CEOs got bonuses and more jobs got shipped overseas. And my friend was standing here at the brink of being homeless.
2 minutes.
I want to thank everybody, and I look forward to having you all join us in this wonderful journey.
Oh, you have 1 more minute. I'm so sorry.
I'll take it.
You gotta wait for it to make a noise.
So I said enough was enough for me. I saw the challenges firsthand as a social worker, and I saw what was happening in our nation, so I did what any other honest person would do. I became a politician. Last year, we got nearly 45% of the vote in a district that doesn't even crack 40. Because we showed up, we did the work. And this time around, we will win. We need your support to make that happen. Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, we will raise this 30-second marker, just so you know that you've got 30 seconds.
And your openings will have 3 minutes. I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much to the Federation for hosting. Thanks to the Somerset County Democratic Committee as well. And thanks to all of you for being here. And I also want to thank my parents who are here tonight. You know, a few months ago, I told my parents that I was going to run for Congress. And my father said, "Well, that's great, congratulations, that's great news." And my mother said, "Why should I vote for you?" And I told her, "Please don't, because you don't live in the district." And then I told her the story of Robbie Tolan. Robbie and his cousin were driving home one night. They're 2 young African-American men. They pulled into Robbie's parents' driveway, and a police officer followed them in. Mistakenly, he thought the car was stolen, and he had signaled for backup. When Robbie and his cousin got out of the car, they did everything right. They complied with the officer's instructions. Robbie's parents came out, they explained, "That's our son, it's our nephew, our car, our house, it's a big misunderstanding." Officer Jeffrey Wayne Cotton arrived on the scene. He got out of his car, gun drawn, he grabbed Robbie's mother, he shoved her up against the garage door. Robbie said, "Get your hands off of my mom." Officer Cotton turned and shot 3 times, hitting Robbie in the chest. Fortunately, Robbie survived. He sued Officer Cotton, and I was engaged to represent him in the United States Supreme Court. When we won that case, it was the first time in 10 years they ruled for a civil rights plaintiff in a case like that. I'm running for Congress because I believe in the promise of America, that if you work hard and play by the rules, you'll have a fair shot to succeed. Nothing's guaranteed, but you'll have a fair shot. It was a promise that was made to my family that allowed us to build up a business over 30 years. That promise, though, is slipping away. when our civil rights are under attack with Nazis marching in Charlottesville, when our First Amendment, our free speech rights are under attack with a president who wants to sue because somebody wrote a book he doesn't like. That promise is slipping away when income is up around the country and in our region, but down here in New Jersey. Just a couple days ago, we celebrated the life and legacy of Martin Luther King. On the night he was assassinated, Robert Kennedy gave a speech, and he said, "In this difficult day, in this difficult time, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to go in." And that's the question we face today. I hope you'll stand with me to keep America's promise for all Americans.
Hello, everyone. Is this working?
No. Turn it on. Hold it in close.
Yeah, just use yours. Thanks. How's that? No?
Turn it on.
Thank you. Thank you, Goutam. Thank you, Margaret and Cookie, and thanks to all of you for coming. Welcome to the latest edition of Seven Brides for the 7th District. When I was just 5 years old, I remember my mother pushing a wad of cash across a table into the hands of a corrupt official in the little town in communist Poland where I grew up. She was trying to get us a passport so that we could leave that place. And I was just a kid. I was not political, but I could feel, I could understand what everyone in that situation knows, that I was in a place where people who had power could kick the crap out of people who don't have power, and there was nothing that any of us could do about it. Now, we got that passport. We came to this country. We settled in New Jersey, and I had a normal, happy New Jersey childhood. But I always remembered that all the things that we consider to be normal in America are, in fact, incredibly rare, incredibly precious, fragile, easy to lose if we don't fight for them all the time. That's why I became a human rights activist and spent a good part of my life waging fights like trying to stop the Bush administration and its policies of torture 10 years ago. That's why I was proud to serve President Clinton in the 1990s and President Obama as an Assistant Secretary of State, representing our country's finest values around the world. Now, everything that I fought for on behalf of our country is under attack within our country. And I'm running because, Trump may have won an election, but we cannot allow him to win the argument about who we are as a people. We are not a country that refuses to distinguish between white supremacists and the patriotic Americans who protest against them. We're not a country that deports people because of the color of their skin or where they come from. We're not the country that Trump thinks that we are. And we cannot allow Republicans in Congress to take advantage of the Trump chaos to foist on New Jersey policies that are designed to hurt us, that are designed to hurt states like ours, where we have chosen to have better services, better schools, and to pay for those things, as the Republican tax bill tries to do. I'm running to protect our country, to protect our values, to protect our district, and to protect our state. And I'm running because I believe that our party in this election can be a unifying party, can help to heal this country's divisions. We have always been the party that stands up for working people, people without power in this country. That's why this immigrant kid from Poland became a Democrat years ago. But we can also now be the party of fiscal responsibility, of patriotism, of defending our country, the party of math, of science, a party that you can unify people across this district and win. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Federation, thank you to the Somerset County Dems, thank you most of all for all of you coming out tonight. My name is Lisa Mandelblatt and I'm running for Congress. You're all here tonight because you're trying to figure out who amongst us is the best situated to beat Lance in November and ensure that the Democrats take back control of the House. I want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about me, why I'm running, and why I'm that candidate. I'm running for Congress because I truly believe that it is time that we have a representative in Washington who's fighting for our values and not rubber stamping a Republican agenda. It is going to be imperative that we have a candidate who can connect with voters on a personal level, who can energize the grassroots and leverage that to victory in November. That's what I bring to the table. You also deserve a congresswoman who can represent this district from day one. I can do that because I know this district. I grew up in this district. I left to go to Cornell and Fordham Law School and to practice law. But then I chose to come back to this district to raise my family and serve my community. I live in this district, I volunteer in this district, I've worked in this district, I vote in this district, and I pay property taxes in this district. And this is the district that I want to represent in Washington. I have worked for Congresswoman Schroeder when I was at Cornell, and I've had serious conversations with sitting members of Congress. I have an idea of what this job is, and one of the biggest parts of it is making sure that I am serving you, the constituents, the people of the district. Constituent services is a huge part of this job. That means if you're having problems with a federal agency, I and my staff are going to help you negotiate that. And I don't care what any of these guys tell you, whoever's elected in November will be seated as a freshman in January. Trust me, there are plenty of egos in Washington, and none of us are leapfrogging to the top of the list. That means getting to Washington, rolling up my sleeves, being an active member of my committee, and working to make relationships with other members of Congress, more senior members, to make sure that the issues that we care about here in New Jersey are being addressed in Washington. I am proud to be from this district. I would be honored to be your representative. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion, and I hope I can count on your support.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you to the Federation, Peg, Nathan, Margaret, Cookie. The energy in this campaign is incredible, and I've been involved in this district for over 20 years, and this is by far the best. So thank you everyone for being here. My name is David Pringle, and I am running for Congress. I believe I am uniquely qualified to represent you in this campaign and in DC next year, because I am one of you, and I've been fighting for you for 30 years, winning legislative and political campaigns, stopping things that should be stopped, and making things happen that should happen. And let me elaborate. I'm a lifelong resident of Cranford. My first political campaign was my father's run for township committee when I was 3 and I was handing out lit, and I haven't stopped since. I registered voters in Newark right out of college, and I've been running statewide campaigns throughout my 30-year career. I live in Cranford, but I have been fighting for the entire district for 30 years. There's not a single town that hasn't directly benefited from my environmental advocacy work. I'm most known for that work, getting the Highlands Act passed, which covers 4 of the counties in the district and provides water for all 6 counties. I've fought oil bomb trains that are going through this town tonight, through Hillsborough and Montgomery and Union County. I've stopped coal-fired power plants in Warren County, actually in Pennsylvania, that are polluting Warren County. I'm a leader in the fight against the Penny's gas pipeline in Hunterdon County, and I'm fighting the Pilgrim Oil pipeline in Union County. I have fought to ensure critical water protections and gotten them passed. All the critical waterways in Somerset County, the tributaries of the Millstone River and the Raritan River. We've protected the land and protected the water. While I'm most known for my environmental advocacy, I've been doing coalition work throughout my career. I've worked with Consumers for Civil Justice. I helped found it. That's a group of lawyers and consumer groups. Barry Brandell helped me get that going back in 1995 or so. There are corporate interests that wanted to shut the courthouse doors to victims of asbestos and medical malpractice and breast implants, and we fought and stopped powerful corporate interests. Just this past weekend, I helped play a leadership role and got stopped a $3 billion nuclear bailout for PSE&G that couldn't be stopped. At the same time, I stopped that Christie plan. I got the governor to sign a bill on mercury. So whether it be, some folks have been tilting at windmills. I don't tilt at windmills. I stop powerful corporate interests when they need to be stopped, and I make it happen when it needs to happen. And I look forward to the rest of the conversation and you finding out more about me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Scott Salmon. I'm an attorney who represents small business owners all across New Jersey. I stand up and fight for their rights in court and ensure that every small business owner is given the fair opportunities they need to succeed. I'm running for Congress because here's what I see. I see 40 million Americans living in poverty. I see minorities being targeted by a for-profit criminal justice system. I see our youth being told, you got to go to college, but when you graduate, if you can get a job at all, you're going to have a lifetime of student debt and you're going to have a job that doesn't pay you enough to pay the bills. I see middle-class families struggling to keep their head above water, working harder for less money and paying more for housing and education and health care. I see women and immigrants and the LGBT community seeing their most fundamental rights under attack. I'm running for Congress because I want everyone to have a fair opportunity to succeed. Now, if the true measure of a society is whether we are leaving our children a better life than our own, then we need to do a better job. For too long, we have ignored the future at the expense of we have ignored the future to benefit the present. I think it's time for a new generation of leaders, one that will be part of that future. And that's why I'm running for Congress, and that's why I'm hoping to earn your support tonight. Thank you very much.
I'm Linda Weber. Thank you to the Somerset County Democrats, to the Federation, and all of you who are here tonight. You could have been doing a lot of other things, and you chose to spend your time here, so I really do appreciate it. But if you had told me just a few years ago that our president would attack an entire continent with racial insults, or that neo-Nazis would be marching in the streets, or that my son's girlfriend would have a harder time getting birth control than I did, I would have said you were crazy. But every single day, we see firsthand that progress is fragile, and that's why I'm running for Congress. My husband is a teacher right here in Somerset County. We live in Berkeley Heights, where we raised our two boys, and Theo and Luke, and they went through the public schools there. I've been on the board of directors of the American Cancer Society here in New Jersey for many years, raising millions of dollars for cancer research. And I have a 30-year career as an executive in technology and finance, building some of the nation's first online banking platforms. Now, I've had some amazing opportunities in my career, but I have used my influence to open doors for women, for people of color, for LGBTQ Americans. And I've seen progress. It used to be that women had to choose between a career and motherhood. I didn't have to. In fact, I was on the front page of the American Banker newspaper when I was 8 months pregnant. Now that was a sign of progress. But Leonard Lance and Congressional Republicans continue to enable Donald Trump's backwards policies. On health care, Obamacare expanded access for 23 million Americans and banned discrimination against pre-existing conditions. Lance voted to repeal over 60 times and voted Trump Care out of committee. Worse yet, our current Republican Congress refuses to renew the Children's Health Insurance Program, a program that covers 9 million children and pregnant moms. I will fight to save CHIP and to put the Medicare public option on all the exchanges so that everyone has access to affordable health care. On women's rights, I thought we had secured the right to control our own health care decisions. But Leonard Lance has a paltry 3% Planned Parenthood score, and Donald Trump continues to roll back equal pay protections. I'll fight for a woman's right to choose, to fund Planned Parenthood, and for pay equity. And on the economy, We do not have a rich aren't getting rich enough problem in this country. We have a middle class is shrinking problem. Lance pretends that he opposes this GOP tax scam, but when Trump and Ryan gave him his marching orders, he voted to move it to conference. Thank you all very much. I look forward to the rest of the evening, and remember, progress is fragile.
So, our first question for the night. What differentiates you from the other candidates? What differentiates you from the other candidates? Please be brief but specific. Peter? All right.
We knew this district was flippable even before anybody thought Leonard Lance was touchable. We knew what was in stake back in 2016 when a misogynist, unqualified reality TV star whose greatest business skill is bankruptcy was gaining momentum. We showed up and we did the work and we proved this district was flippable. We had over 1,500 volunteers across 14 states. On election day, we made 36,000 phone calls with the result of 43% of the vote, the strongest campaign against Leonard Lance to date. But the one issue that brought a lot of people together is the one issue that we talked across the spectrum, across the political spectrum. And that is the fact that we have, and we can talk about various issues, but we never address why. Why do we not have health care as a human right? Why are we dealing with this tax scam? Why do we have to defend net neutrality? How many incidences of gun violences do we need to see before our Congress does something? And the reality is, the crux of the problem is, there is a tsunami of money that floods the pockets of politicians and drowns out all of our voices. Politicians are no longer elected, folks. They are bought and paid for long before many of us even enter a booth. That is what we are fighting to fix. And that is why this campaign has unequivocally said we need to overturn Citizens United, that corporations are not people and money is not speech. But also we need to go a step further. We need to do what 5 municipalities right here in the Garden State have done and many others throughout America have done, and that is pass the American Anti-Corruption Act. We need to limit lobbyists, we need to put a limit on campaign contributions, and we need to close the revolving door between special interests and Congress. That is what we're going to propose when we get to Washington, and guess what? You all are coming with us. We're going to restore the seat right back where it belongs, and that is you, we, the people. Thank you.
You're looking here at 7 candidates, any of whom will make a better member of Congress than Leonard Lance. That's the easy part. The question is, what's the best way to take out Leonard Lance to flip the district? The best way to take out Leonard Lance, the best candidate to take on Leonard Lance, is to draw the sharpest contrast with Leonard Lance. Over the last 10 years, Leonard Lance has gone hard to the right. I'm a progressive. Leonard Lance is a career political insider. I'm not. I got my start as an organizer and an activist, mobilizing young people to get involved in politics. And for the last 10 years, I've been practicing as a litigator. By all accounts, Leonard Lance is a very nice person. I'm a jerk. I'm mostly serious, except on the last point. But we're not going to out Leonard Lance. This isn't a moment for insider politics. The way we flipped seats like the 7th District in New Jersey and in Virginia and across the country in the last year or so is by running young, diverse, progressive candidates who aren't from the political establishment. We did that because that's where the electorate is now. If you had told me a year ago that a transgender woman was going to win a state election in Virginia, I would have gladly taken the opposite side of that bet. She won because those are the kinds of ideas and those are the kinds of visions that we need in politics now. And this isn't a short-term process. It isn't about winning an election, because it doesn't do any of us any good to win in November and lose in 2020 and go back to the status quo. I went to law school with Joe Kennedy III, who's a congressman from Massachusetts. I had coffee with him recently and we were talking about this problem. And he said it's a 5-year process. You run, campaign for a year, if all goes well, you win. And you've got to run hard for 2 more years because you have a target on your back, and that's what they're doing to Josh Gottheimer right now. And then you've got to do it again. And if you win 3 times, then we can change the district fundamentally. I'm not running to win an election, running to engage people in the political process in a meaningful way, because this is a long-term project.
We all share the same values up here, and I would be proud to have any of the other 6 candidates up here as my representative in Congress. But nothing we say here today matters if we cannot win in November and serve effectively if we win. So I'm going to try to offer 3.5 distinctions. Number 1, we do need a contrast with Leonard Lance. And I've been a human rights activist all of my adult life, fighting for the values that Donald Trump stands against and that this Republican Congress stands against. But this is also a politically diverse district. And I have fought those battles in a responsible way, always working with Republicans as well as Democrats, and serving in high positions of trust in our national security agencies in this country. I think I can appeal to people on all sides of the political spectrum in this district. Number 2, I can bring national support and attention to this race. We cannot do this alone. We are not just competing with Leonard Lance, we are competing with other competitive House races in about 60 other districts in the country. And I have already been able to put this district on the map with the resources and the media attention that our campaign has attracted. And number 3, if elected, I can hit the ground running. Lisa's right. It's hard to stand out as one of 435 members of the House of Representatives. But experience does matter, and we don't have time to wait because we need to hold Donald Trump accountable now. I have gotten legislation through the United States Congress. In fact, I've passed more bills, I think, than Leonard Lance has, which is probably good news for all the rest of us. Reason 3.5, my name might not sound as good in Sanskrit as yours, Goutam, but I can tell you I'm Donald Trump's nightmare because he will never be able to find a rhyme for my last name. So send Malinowski to the house key because Leonard Lance has had his chance.
I couldn't be more different than Leonard Lance. First of all, I'm a woman. And it is high time we start sending women to Congress. The conversation will not change until there are more women in the room where decisions are made. I am an attorney, a community leader, and an educator. I bring a very varied background to this. And I will take all of those experiences to make sure that we are represented in Washington. I am not a career politician. I did not move to this district to run for Congress. I am not doing this for ego or to build my resume. I am doing this because I truly feel called to this. I would be so honored to be your representative, and I would work hard every single day to make sure that we move this country forward and stop that dangerous GOP agenda that Leonard Lance just keeps rubber stamping, rubber stamping, rubber stamping. Thank you.
I am a public interest advocate. We have lawyers, we have bankers, we have all kinds of corporate folks in Congress. We don't have nearly enough public interest advocates. I've been fighting the Donald Trumps of the world my entire adult life. Some tilted windmills, I fight and beat corporate interests. I'm also uniquely qualified because I was actually in the legislature before Leonard Lance was. I was lobbying for New Jersey PIRG, working to get an initiative referendum passed in 1992. Leonard Lance's first year as an assemblyman. He campaigned on getting it done, and he started betraying us in his very first state office because he betrayed us on an initiative referendum. I've worked with him and against him throughout his career,
I know him. I will get under his skin in a way that nobody else can, because I know things about him. It was said earlier that folks see the middle class. Look at me. I am the middle class. I struggle every 6 months with my wife figuring out how we're going to pay the next semester's tuition bills. We're fortunate enough that it's not a question about whether our kids will go to college, but it is a struggle, and we struggle every day trying to figure out how to move money around, where to borrow money from, and it's an outrage to the kind of debt that students have when they get out of college. I've also struggled with healthcare. My family, everybody has family tragedies and concerns. Just in the last few years, my family suffered dementia from my mother. My brother-in-law passed away from his third bout of cancer a few months ago. My other brother-in-law is paralyzed from the chest down from a bicycle accident for the past year and a half. It's a struggle. And when you're in your worst times, you can't afford to spend any time or energy or agony trying to understand a medical bill or trying to figure out how you're going to pay that medical bill. It's an outrage that we as an industrialized modern country don't have healthcare the way the rest of the world does. So I get that. I have fought for you for 30 years, and I will bring that to Congress. Thank you.
Well, for one thing, you may notice I am considerably younger than everybody else up here. I think that's a good thing. I think we need a change. I think we need a new generation of leaders. I think Leonard Lance has been in office forever, and when people see that, when they see me, they're going to know this is going to be something different. This is someone that's going to represent us for the next 20 years. Another difference between myself and the other candidates is that I've done this before. I've helped flip 2 other seats from red to blue, congressional seats. I did it last year with Josh Gottheimer up in the 5th District. I helped lead his policy team when we flipped that seat from red to blue. I did it back in 2008 when I helped Mike McMahon from Staten Island, which if you know anything about Staten Island politics, you know it is as red as you get, and we flipped it from red to blue. So I've done this before, and I know what it takes in this district. And a perfect example of that is that for the past 6 months or so that I've been in this race, I've been out canvassing almost every day, knocking on doors and talking to voters, because it's not something that we can just do in those last few months. We've knocked on thousands of doors. My campaign has over 100 volunteers already, with 6 months to go before the primary. We have more than 700 donors, giving an average donation about $25 a person. And so we have that grassroots energy, that grassroots spirit that's going to help us win next November. That's one of those big differences between myself and I think the other candidates.
So everyone talks about contrast with Leonard Lance. I agree, but I believe by far I present the best contrast to Leonard Lance. Not just because I've built businesses, I've turned businesses around from startups to Fortune 500 companies, but because for most of my 30-year career, I've been the only woman at the table as an executive in technology and finance. Why is that important? I've learned to work with people who are different than me. Now, most of the time, those are older white guys, but I happen to like older white guys. I'm married to one and I hope to raise 2. But very seriously, I get asked all the time, what are you going to do to help move things forward in Washington? We're sick of the rancor. We're sick of the divisiveness. I know how to cross those boundaries. I know how to reach out, and I know how to build relationships. I run a corporate cash management business at Israel Discount Bank in New York City. My clients are middle market family businesses. I know how to build those relationships to get things done, to come to solution with people who are different than me. In addition, I bring a technology background that is sorely lacking from most of our Congress members today. It is important to have more women in Congress, certainly, and I'm happy to help represent my gender better in Congress. However, we need diversity of backgrounds as well. And my background in technology is important. Why? Because our entire economy is built on technology. I don't care if you're checking out at the 7-Eleven, or if you're having a package delivered from UPS, or if you're running a cybersecurity operation. And I know a lot about cybersecurity. Internet banking has been my career. All of these industries are based on technology. So I think I present a terrific contrast to the rest of the candidates up here, and I'm the best one to beat Leonard Lance. Picture us up on a podium.
Briefly, how would you work to motivate each of the major generational constituencies? Baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials. What do you see as the unique concerns of each of these groups?
As a social worker and then as a candidate for U.S. Congress, I've had the honor with working with people across the social, economic, political strata. Once upon a time in this country, under the leadership of a great Democrat by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose legacy the Democratic Party lives on today and often forgets, created an economy that actually works for each and every single one of us. On a single income, you could buy a home, buy a car, put your children through college, then retire with dignity. That's no longer a reality in the 21st century when we should have been above and beyond all this. When I went out and I knocked down doors and met with people, the people who came to our office right down the street on Gaston Avenue, whether they were baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, the concerns were very similar. These are not mutually exclusive groups, in my opinion. People want gainful employment. People want to make sure they retire with dignity. People want to make sure that their kids, when they come back home, in places like Hunterdon County, out of the 21 counties, has the largest amount of millennials, young people graduating college and coming back home with a lack of opportunities. They want to make sure they have a sense of meaning and purpose and give back to their communities. They care about healthcare. No one wants to go bankrupt. I still have friends who are stuck in medical debt back from college, and we're talking about 10 years plus. We want to make sure that we serve the people who need to be served, not the 0.1% of people who have more than they need ultimately. And our campaign has always been about bringing people across every age group. And at the end of the day, the thing I became most proud about and the thing that reflected most to me was when I go out to those communities, when I'm out there and people say, "You're Peter Jacob, right?" And I say yes, because they realize it took a brown-skinned, bearded, millennial social worker, unapologetically progressive Democrat to prove that this district was flippable. If that's not being a Democrat, I don't know what is.
Thank you, Cookie, for the question. You know, I've been out to all 75 towns in the district as part of this campaign. And one thing that I hear, the thing that I hear over and over, the thing that I've learned from those visits and those conversations, is that there's far more that unites us across age groups, across background, across rural, urban, wherever people live. And fundamentally, incomes are not keeping up with the rising cost of living. In New Jersey, over the last 8 years, income is actually down 6%, even though it's up in the country and it's up across the river in Pennsylvania and the other way in New York. And that's an issue that hits people across all age groups. When I was at a house party in Lambertville, it's that college student I was talking to who was worried that he's not going to be able to find a job that'll help him make his student loan payments after he graduates. It's the working mother I was talking to from Morris County the other day, who said that she struggles with working versus childcare. Not because she can't go back to work, but because the cost of childcare is so high that it's not economical to pay for childcare and go back to the workforce. It's the retiree I was talking to who's worried that Social Security and Medicare are next on the chopping block for Paul Ryan, Leonard Lance, and the Trump-Lance agenda right now. My number one priority if I'm elected to Congress is to get rid of this tax bill, which is an absolute abomination. It puts a target on the backs of states like New Jersey. We need to deliver real tax reform to the middle class and to working families, and then we can address some of these issues that, as I say, apply across age groups and across the district.
Cookie, it's a very good question because we all know that we didn't motivate young people enough in the 2016 election, and there are better ways for campaigns to get the message across to young people. You're going to be seeing a lot of text messages, and social media from my campaign. But fundamentally, I think we would be mistaken as a party to fall into the trap, again, of trying to divide the American people into categories. Divide young people from seniors, men from women, people of color from folks who look like me. I've been all around this district, and I have met so many seniors who are anguished about the fact that young people are leaving New Jersey, and who are passionately committed to the fight against long-term climate change. And I've met a lot of young people who want us to be protecting Social Security and Medicare. I've met a lot of men in this district who are passionate about protecting Planned Parenthood because they know that it benefits every single member of our family, of our common family. And I've met a lot of women whose first question for me at our forums is about North Korea or Russia or national security. This is how we win, by appealing to people as Americans who love this country, by running on issues and ideas, not on identity. That's how Democrats do well. And that's how, by the way, we end up with diverse people in our Congress and in our government. How do we motivate people, whether they're younger or older? I think we put up candidates who are real. We put up candidates who say what they think what they say, do it sincerely, do it passionately. That's the kind of candidate that I hope to be to everybody I speak to in this district.
So since announcing my candidacy, I've put probably 8,000 miles on my car, traveling all over this district. I've been to meetings of the Young Dems, I've been to resistance groups, and I gotta tell you, it doesn't matter how old anybody is, I'm hearing the same issues over and over again. People are worried about our economy. New Jersey has continued to lag behind. We have got to jumpstart our economy. Look, I have kids that I would love to move back to New Jersey. They can't move back here if they can't get good paying jobs, and if they choose to live here and work in Manhattan, they need to be able to get there. We need to be investing in our infrastructure. That means improving our roads. We've got to figure out this train situation, and in the western part of the district, they need high-speed internet. It is about the economy. It's about education. It's about making sure that college is more affordable. It's making sure that every American has access to quality, affordable health care. Doesn't matter how old anybody is. These are the issues that resonate. And as long as that's what we're talking about, that's how we're going to engage the electorate and win in November.
In a lot of ways, I am all three generations. I am Generation X. My children are millennials. I am the youngest of 4 siblings. They're 7, 8, and 10 years older than me, so technically they're baby boomers and I'm not. I was born in 1966. Struggling also with my parents and my in-laws and their health issues. All of the contributors and volunteers on my campaign span all 3 generations. So I have found that while the exact emphasis or priorities might vary a little bit, the issues are the same. My children see my mother's dementia and they're concerned about health care. My in-laws see the struggles we're making in college payments and they're concerned about the future. They're constantly, especially given my chosen career path, concerned about the economics of my immediate family, given public interest salaries for the last 30 years. So all of those issues come together, whether it's whatever generation you are. And I've been fighting for those issues for 30 years, and no offense to Scott, but some of us actually have been working on campaigns since more than the last 2 or 3 years. I think my first one, you might not have been born yet, 1992. I helped Frank Pallone get elected. He had lost his district in the primary, and he had a very tough general election, helped Torricelli get the Senate seat. That was at the time, New Jersey was a purple state. That was a very competitive race against Dick Zimmer. Some argue the nastiest race in New Jersey history. I helped Kerry get flipped New Hampshire in 2004. Clean Water Action donated me to that effort. It was the only state that that flipped from red to blue that year. I ran an independent expenditure to help Gottheimer get elected last year. We knocked on 60,000 doors. So those are the kinds of experiences and policy wins I've had that span all 3 generations. Thank you.
You know, a lot of the other candidates touched on some of these specific issues that affect each of the different generations, and I'm not going to address that because I think they did a pretty good job of it. I think one of the issues that affects everyone regardless of what generation you're in, whether you're millennial or Generation X or a baby boomer, is an overall distrust of politicians. People don't believe in the political system anymore because they don't believe in their politicians. And the reason for that, one of the main reasons, is that we don't know who they are as people. We don't know what they're like. They tell us these canned lines and they have these cultivated social media profiles and they tell us what they want us to know. But we don't really get inside and know who they are as people, and because of that, it becomes hard to believe that they're really fighting for us. My campaign is trying to change that. What we're doing, you can check this out on our Facebook page, or if you go on Facebook and search under the name Vote Salmon, we are using Facebook Live to live stream our campaign. We are live streaming meet and greets and rallies and forums like this one, and we're bringing the camera into the car when we're driving from all the way from Westfield up to Lambertville. I'm answering questions when I can because I want you to know who I am as a person, because I think that's something that's really lacking in our politics these days. Very few people in this room can say that they know who Leonard Lance is. I want to make sure, as a person, and I want to make sure that you can say the same about me. And I think that's something that is going to reach people regardless, like I said, if they're a millennial or if they're a baby boomer or Generation X, however old they are. I think that's something that's going to appeal to them. Like I said, we have over 100 volunteers in our campaign. They've seen these videos. They're fired up. They're ready to go. I think they believe in the political system, or they're starting to believe in the political system more because they know they can believe in me. They know they can trust me. I hope and earn your trust as well.
So I think you see we're all on the right side of these issues, which is usually on the left side of the issues, but I think the vast majority of voters, as my competitors here have said, are pretty much, all voters of all ages are pretty much concerned about the same issues: the environment, healthcare, the economy. But let me throw out a few specifics that I know a lot about because of what I do for a living and what I've done for a living for 30 years. First of all, we do know, when you break it down, that net neutrality is a larger concern for younger people than it is for older people in general. I know a lot about net neutrality. I started an e-commerce business in Seattle in the 90s. I understand the importance of net neutrality for basically incentivizing development of entrepreneurs building companies. The second thing is student loan debt. There is no reason that student loan debt should not be priced at the same rate that our large banks pay over the counter for money. And that's right now about 1.25%, give or take, right? So I would immediately say that all student loan debt gets reset to 1.25% and mirrors the Fed funds rate, which is what our big banks pay for money. I think that when we look at baby boomers, and my husband and I argue about who's a baby boomer and who's a Gen Xer, because I was born in '63 and he was born in '64. But I think we do care a lot about Medicare and Social Security. As we're looking at our retirement or our future, not wanting to be a burden to our children, I think it really is important that we get rid of this tax scam, this GOT tax scam, which they only passed, in my opinion, to be able to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So that is really, really important, I think, to baby boomers and to our kids. But it's something that we're more acutely aware of while they worry about student loan debt and net neutrality.
I'm going to shake it up a bit and have you, Linda, start for this next question. So the next question is, we all know that you are going to vote the right way on just about everything. How are you going to go to bat for CD7 specifically? How do you maintain your commitment to representing your local constituents while fighting the Trump administration policies?
So I'll start where I finished. the GOP tax scam. First thing we need to do is repeal that bill. And I will fight for tax reform that really grows our economy and that really helps the people that need it. That is already taking a toll, that bill is already taking a toll on our property values, both here in New Jersey and in New York State. It's already being documented because of the loss of the state and local tax deduction. And we need to really focus on that. The second thing is infrastructure. I'm a New York commuter. How many of you commute into New York? Not as many as I thought. Our infrastructure is in terrible shape. I spent some time with an transportation infrastructure expert when I first started running last year, and I asked him, I said, Dan, when I'm stuck on Route 78 and I see the concrete crumbling under the overpass, should I be concerned or is that just cosmetic? And he said, no, you should be concerned. You should be very concerned because it shows a lack of maintenance and it shows the concrete is actually coming apart. Concrete isn't meant to last forever. So for those of you that don't commute to New York, you do, I'm sure, drive on the highways around here and you go under a lot of overpasses. So don't be too scared when you look underneath, but there's certainly a lot of room for infrastructure improvement in our district, and I will fight for that. And I will work with our colleagues in New York to make sure that we secure funding that cannot be removed for the Gateway Tunnel. The ARC Tunnel would be almost built by now if Chris Christie hadn't stopped that project, and there's no way that we can let the Gateway project be terminated. Absolutely not. And then finally, as it relates to the economy, I really believe we have a great opportunity in our district to build what I call an innovation zone. About 40 years ago, we ceded our technology prominence to California. The phone that's in your pocket, half of that technology was built right in our district, and we really need to get back and allow our kids that are getting STEM degrees to come back to the district here with good paying jobs.
Yes. The 7th district has a lot of specific concerns. For example, as Lisa mentioned, we need access to high-speed internet out in Hunterdon and Warren County, certain parts of Hunterdon and Warren counties. New Jersey gets only 4% of its education funding from the federal government, whereas other states average about 9%. And so we need to fight to make sure that we're getting our fair share back. That way we can start to lower our property taxes out here in the 7th district. 42% of our roads here in New Jersey are considered deficient. We have water lines that were built between 1890, which is when Benjamin Harrison was president, and 1930. We have 4 train lines, most of any district in the state. We have 20,000 people. I know a lot of you don't commute to the city, but we have 20,000 people in this district that do commute into the city every day. More than 200,000 people that just commute in general on either using public transportation or on our roads. Like I said, 42% of our roads are considered deficient. So we have a lot of these ultra-specific things that affect us here in the district, and those are the things I want to fight for. And now those will always be my top priority. I'm being elected to represent the people here in the 7th district. These are the people that I'm representing. Those are the issues that I'm going to focus on.
I think opposing the craziness of the Trump agenda and fighting for constituent concerns is a distinction without a difference. I very much agree with Linda and the plans on tax package. I like to talk a lot about the 4 E's: education, the environment, energy, and the economy. Concerning climate, really ties everything together. The solutions to climate change is green energy. It creates more jobs than fossil fuels. The fact that we're even having this debate shows you where our education system is, or at least what some people, namely Trump and his cronies, think we can do about education. Science doesn't matter. There's a proposal they're putting forward that the Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control cannot use the words science-based or evidence-based. We've gotten to the point where the things that used to be taken for granted, basic fundamental institutions, can't be taken for granted. You might not always love when the feds come knocking at your door, but until now, folks have had faith that the FBI is doing the right thing. You never used to question the ethnicity of a judge, but that's the kind of state that Trump has created for us. So we have, so the concerns of the constituents are the same as fighting Trump. We have to do it. They're not mutually exclusive. They're simpatico. And I've been fighting that kind of fight for my entire career, and I will bring that to Congress.
Standing up to Trump goes hand in hand with representing this district. We have got to make sure that we start getting money out of the federal government. We pay a lot of money in taxes, and yet we never seem to get our fair share. New Jersey's the second lowest in the country. We're never going to be Mississippi, we're never going to be Alabama, but we should be getting our fair share. And the problem is we don't have a representative who's fighting for that in Washington. Look, if Trump has a good idea, I'll work with him. But the hundreds of other things he comes up with, I will fight him tooth and nail. And I won't do it alone. I will make sure that when I'm in Washington, that I am creating relationships and coalitions. There is strength in numbers. And I'm going to work with other members of Congress to make sure that we present a unified front and we stop the dangerous GOP agenda.
So when you sent us these questions, I was looking at this one in particular, and I was actually sitting on a New Jersey Transit train that was stuck for an hour because the Portal Bridge was down. So you can imagine my answer to this question in terms of what we need specifically for this district. And you know, the way the question is posed, it suggests, and I think some of you addressed this, that there may be some conflict between the duty we are all going to feel to stand up to Trump and our duty to our constituents to work on things that matter to people here locally. And what's interesting about that is that is the calculation that I think Leonard Lance made in the last few years. He's actually said this, that, you know, I can't really afford to stand up to the guy too much because I got to work with him on Gateway. And then what did Trump do? He went back on the deal on Gateway. So I think we have seen, it's not because Trump is, it's not just because he's a terrible president and a terrible man. As a practical matter, working with him on these issues, silencing your criticism, muting your criticism of his assault on our values and our institutions, because we think somehow he's going to be nice to New Jersey and allow the transportation funding to flow to the state is a tactical mistake. The only infrastructure project that Donald Trump is committed to is a wall on the US-Mexican border. That's the only thing he's fighting for. He is not fighting for us. So that would be my number one priority in terms of things that matter to people in the state. There are a lot of other local issues. There's the pipeline running through Hunterdon County and another one potentially in Union County. I think Phil Murphy is going to take some actions that are going to take care of those issues in the short term. But as a member of Congress, I want to look at the structural problem of how these pipelines are approved by FERC when they make no economic sense. That's something we can do something about in the Congress, and I intend to do it.
I agree with much of what's been said. You know, New Jersey is one of the states that's been mentioned that sends more money to the federal government by far than we get back. Well, one of the things on that point is that there are ways we can get that money back. We had an opportunity to get that money back through the ARC tunnel. Chris Christie sent it back to the federal government. The reason we need to invest in infrastructure is not just so we can get some of our tax dollars back, but because this is something that hits people every day in their lives. Some of us went through the summer of hell trying to commute into New York when the trains weren't running. I said to my wife recently that we should invest in infrastructure. It's a jobs issue because we can create good paying and sustainable jobs. I don't know why I was in campaign mode with my wife, but there we were. And she said infrastructure is a jobs issue because I'm going to get fired if I keep showing up for work late when the trains aren't running. It's about the parents I was talking to when the trains were canceled who couldn't get back to pick up their kids from childcare before their childcare center closed. And it's about the girl who, without reliable internet access couldn't apply for a college scholarship because they had to apply online. And every time she clicked from page 1 to page 2, it took so long to load the next page that the application reset and she could never apply for that scholarship. These are issues that hit people in their everyday lives, and I know we all use words like infrastructure and investment and taxes, but I think we need to not lose sight of the fact that there are people, real people that are affected by these on a day-to-day basis. So those, I think, are some of the priorities, and it's absolutely correct what's been said. There's no distinction between standing up for the constituents of this district and being a check and balance for President Trump. And what Leonard Lance has done is the least defensible thing of all. He's trying to calculate what's the minimum percentage I can disagree with Paul Ryan and still guarantee myself re-election. And that's a calculation that speaks of an absolute lack of integrity. And that's something that I don't respect, and that's why we need to replace it.
Let me tell you about how our movement is going to be going to bat for you when we get to the United States Congress. I've had the pleasure of meeting tons of people across this district. And what I found out was there is a lot of strong human as well as financial capital that we are not tapping into in this district. Leonard Lance sits on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, a strong committee, and after nearly 10 years in Congress has brought nothing back to this district. So when I knock on those doors, when people say, who are you running against? Leonard Lance? Oh, you got my vote. It's pretty clear. We have some of the leading solar panel integrators in all the East Coast right here in our 7th Congressional District. We are home to big telecom and big pharmaceutical industries. Often people want to say, and throughout the nation in various congressional districts, let's be the next Silicon Valley. I say no, let's do our own thing. Let's tap into our young people, and let's use the leadership and guidance of those who see more sunrises and sunsets. When's the last time you heard a telecom or pharmaceutical startup? You don't, but I have a vision. We could do those things right here, but we need to bring the resources and leadership to make it happen. But the fundamental reason why we're not having that happen, here's the problem once more. The next Jonas Salk is sitting at a desk job because she needs the benefits. Because we all know being a woman is a pre-existing condition. The next Einstein or the next Elon Musk, who's going to outdo all them, he or she is sitting at a desk job crushed by the weight of student loan debt that they'll be paying for the next 30 years. This is why our campaign has unequivocally said we need a Medicare for all single-payer system, and we need to return to what this country did with the University of California and the city colleges of New York. We need debt-free, tuition-free, fully funded higher education in our nation.
So I'm keeping watch of the time, so I might cut out a few questions just so we can move along. So one of the questions, this is going to be a twofer. So let's all agree we all dislike Leonard Lance. Besides the record of largely standing with Trump's agenda, what else can you cite as the shortcomings of Leonard Lance? And also, are there any ways in which Lance has served this district effectively? So since this is a twofer, I'll give you 3 minutes each. Peter?
I've had the opportunity to speak with Congressman Leonard Lance on the debate floor, as well as shortly after the election, I called him to wish him congratulations on his victory, although there's no such thing as victories in gerrymandered districts. And at the end of the conversation, I just wanted one Homo sapien talking to another Homo sapien, sincere conversation about the impact of climate change. We see what's happening in our nation. We see the civil war that broke out in Syria lead to a refugee crisis. We see what's happening in Flint and the environmental degradation that's leading to lead in our water. We see the poisoning of our Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico. I just came back from India after visiting my grandmother who has Alzheimer's. And for the first time in Kerala, where I'm from, there is an influx of people from Bangladesh there because climate change has ruined their farmland, taken away their homes and their livelihoods. And so they've had to move to South India for that. And I said to him, look, Congressman, you sit on the House Energy Commerce Committee. on its subcommittees of health and energy. You could do something about this. And he says, well, Peter, you know, and gives me the same old routine. Folks, we do not deserve that. We deserve better than that in our Congress. We do not need that type of thinking on our planet any longer. We deserve better than that as human beings. When we talk about the issues that are most important to us, and every generation will be judged by what they do and what they leave behind for the next. So when you have a congressperson who is bought and sold by the pharmaceutical industry, by the telecom industry, and does not vote in favor of the people of his district and of this nation, it is about time we question what crisis we're dealing with. Because our economic and social crises are wrapped around a greater moral crisis. And the fundamental problem is money in politics. When Leonard Lance is bought out by the NRA for a few $1,000s, that says a lot. We need to bring about the change, and our candidacy has made it clear that we are taking no corporate PAC money, and we will put an end to the big special interests who have bought out all of our politicians. And our campaign was endorsed by Justice Democrats and another organization by the name of Brand New Congress. We need to wipe the slate clean. We need new and better leadership and put an end to this disgusting form of politics we see in our government on the day-to-day basis.
So the questions are, basically, what's one good thing about Leonard Lance and a bad thing about Leonard Lance, right? I will give him credit for this. Unlike his colleague to the north, Rodney Frelinghuysen, he at least shows up. He's held town halls, which I've been to. They're not compelling theater, but at least he shows up. I've been to protests outside his office, and when he's there, I've been invited in with some protesters. He at least listened to us. I had questions for him on the tax bill. He was not straight with me, but at least he shows up. When I saw the question about criticism of Leonard Lance, I had an answer. Leonard Lance's biggest legislative accomplishment is a bill that he got passed that says he can't get sued for writing a bad review on Yelp. So here we are, democracy's in the balance, and that's Leonard Lance. He's a lightweight. That's him in a nutshell. So I was going to talk about that, but I can't anymore. Not after what's happened in the last week. Not after the vile and terrible things that the President of the United States said about people from certain countries. And make no mistake, this was not a comment about countries. He said, we don't want people from those countries. It's about people. And they said, oh, it's merit-based immigration. No, it's not. Because he doesn't care if you're a rocket scientist or a person with great moral character, if you have great family values or you're willing to work hard. It's about people that he doesn't like. And I'll tell you that when my father came to this country in 1976 and my mother in 1980, I think I know what word Donald Trump would have used to describe India. And when my wife on her mother's side, her ancestors came from Ireland fleeing famine and starvation in the late 19th century, I think I know what word Donald Trump would have used. And on her father's side, when her family fled persecution in the 1600s and came over on the second ship after the Mayflower, I think I know what word Donald Trump would have used, and you do too. Donald Trump's words are an attack on the very idea of America itself. This is a country where we're unified not by the color of our skin or the language we speak, not by the God we pray to or the country we came from. We are unified because we pledge allegiance to the same flag and we hold the same truths to be self-evident that all of us are created equal. The words that the President spoke are absolutely disqualifying. They are an attack on America. And when Leonard Lance put out his statement, his equivocating statement about any such words, I said on social media, I said, you've got to take a stand. If you believe the President said this, and spoiler alert, he did, then condemn him for it. And if you believe Tom Cotton and Sonny Perdue, who are twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to cover for that despicable language, that attack on the very notion of the promise of America, well then at least have the guts to say that. And Leonard Lance doesn't. That is disqualifying from serving as a member of the United States House of Representatives, full stop. And lightweight Leonard, that's why I'm coming for you this November.
So, Leonard Lance, that Leonard Lance that you just heard eloquently described, he says, oh no, I vote my conscience. So, he voted his conscience for Trump Care in his committee, and then he voted his conscience against it on the floor of the House of Representatives. He voted his conscience for concealed carry reciprocity, and then voted his conscience against it a couple of years later. He voted his conscience against the tax bill, and then voted his conscience to send it to conference committee. So, Leonard, I'd like to meet your conscience, because there's a yoga class down the hall that needs something that flexible. And we're really making the same point. I think there are a lot of people who will agree with some of his votes and disagree with other votes that he's taken over his long career. But the one thing I think most Republicans and Democrats and moderates in this country who care about politics share is a disdain for politicians who lack moral courage, who bend with the wind. And that's how we are going to truthfully paint Leonard Lance's record when we take him on this November and when we beat him this November. You know, there are other Republicans, and I'm not one of them, but at least they have the moral courage to condemn the hateful language that President Trump uses unequivocally, to lead, to act when the president attacks the FBI and our law enforcement institutions and our intelligence community and the patriotism of the men and women who serve our country in uniform and as civil servants, people I worked with in the State Department. 40 sitting Republican members of the Congress actually had the decency to vote against Trump in the last election, and most of them represent districts that are a lot more conservative than this one. Lance did not. He lacks moral courage. What has he done right? I give him props for the town halls and for showing up like Goutam does as well. I also, in a way, am thankful that he's ineffectual, because I think, so let's give him credit for that, because I think we'd be a little bit worse off, maybe a lot worse off, if he actually was more successful in passing legislation in the United States Congress.
Back in February, when I was considering this run, but I hadn't made up my mind, I went to Lance's first town hall at RBCC. And as I sat there with my lucky winning number that I got in, I realized I was watching a man completely devoid of conviction. He stands for nothing except getting reelected. And frankly, we don't need that in Congress. And you know what? Lance was a problem before Trump came on the scene. Let's also not forget that Lance endorsed Trump in May of 2016. He was an early adopter. But way before then, Lance used to have on his website proudly stated that he had voted 67 times to repeal the ACA. He never once came up with an alternate solution. Lance has a 3% approval rating from Planned Parenthood. That's because every chance he gets, he votes to defund Planned Parenthood. He has, I think, about a 17% approval rating from the League of Conservation Voters, and that, I think, carries over from his time in the State House when he actually was fighting sometimes the good fight. But he has an A rating from the NRA. These are not the values that line up with our district. He is not representing us. And the work that you have all been doing by protesting, writing letters, making phone calls, it's working. Because we've seen him go to Paul Ryan and beg to be let out of certain key votes. But I liken him to a rubber band. We've got him pulled back here. We take our eyes off him for 1 second, and back he will go. We deserve a representative in Washington who represents our values, who is going to stand up and fight for us here in CD7. And that's what I intend to do.
To paraphrase Lloyd Benson, I knew Leonard Lance. Leonard Lance was a friend of mine. And Leonard Lance today is not the Leonard Lance of yesteryear. And it pains me to say that because I still hope somewhere in there, I knew at one point there was a really good man. But he has lost his soul. Sold his soul, whatever you want to call it. Just this past summer, I had a constituent meeting with him, with some of the folks from my organization. I've known him, as I mentioned, for 25 years. And I didn't recognize the man before me. He was so condescending to 3 20-somethings that came with me, quizzing them on the details of how the budget works and what a reconciliation bill is and continuing resolutions and all that. We spent 20, 25 minutes on that. And it just further demonstrated to me that whatever once was there is no more, kind of like the little souls of Voldemort for those Harry Potter fans. And it's not even just this, we didn't need this last week. The Access Hollywood tapes, if nothing else, said it all. He could have very easily said, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. He chose not to. He didn't, no offense to Peter, but the race wasn't in jeopardy at that point in time. And he shows no moral courage whatsoever. What's the worst thing that would have happened to him? He doesn't get reelected. I think all of us will lead very fine lives. 6 of us are going to have to in a couple months. And in terms of a good thing, I don't even give him credit for showing up at those forums. I've been to them, and he's not, he's collecting a paycheck. He's not doing it. I've heard he's very good at making sure the ceremonial resolutions get sent to all the Eagle Scouts. As a father of a Boy Scout, that's a good thing. But again, that's doing his job. That's not anything special. I think the biggest problem with Leonard is he doesn't fight. And I'm not sure what's worse. He doesn't know how to fight, or he's unwilling to fight. And all of us at this table will fight. I've been fighting for 30 years, and I really look forward to fighting him in this campaign and looking him in the eye in the debate in the fall and say, I knew Leonard Lance, and you're not Leonard Lance.
I think Leonard Lance's biggest shortcoming is not his voting record to me. I think it's his biggest shortcoming is his name. As I've said, I've been knocking on doors for months. And when I knock on doors and people open the door and I say to them, what do you think about Leonard Lance, or do you know anything that he's been up to? Most people don't know that much about him. They don't know his voting record. They don't know all the times that he voted for Trump Caring Committee before he voted against. They don't know all that. They know that he's been around forever. Oh yeah, I think he's a congressman. I think wasn't he in the state legislature before then? And that's really all they know. And that I think is his biggest weakness, because this is the definition of a change election that we're seeing. People are tired of the textbook establishment politicians who have been there forever, haven't really done anything for us. They've just been sitting there collecting that paycheck, keeping the title, and that's it. People want to see something different. They want to see something new. They don't have time to think about his voting record or worry about it or anything like that, because they're focused on their own lives, as they should be. They want to know what our vision is, what we're going to do, what we're going to do to help them and improve their life. They could not care less what his exact voting record is, but they do know that he's been there forever, he hasn't done anything for them, and then once I finish talking to them, they know exactly what I'm going to do for them to make their life better.
So Leonard Lance has been on every side of every issue, and you've heard my competitors up here today talk about that. And we're going to hammer him on it. People do care that he's a flip-flopper. His negatives in this district are now worse than Donald Trump's, because people recognize that he is not a leader for this district. Let me give you an example of how he's not a leader. You all remember, I'm sure, the weekend in August of Charlottesville. It was a horrible weekend. Tuesday after Charlottesville, about 3 p.m. in the afternoon, I put out a statement condemning Republicans that had been tweeting all weekend about how awful it had been. And I essentially said, Republicans, enough of the tweets, enough of the words, we need to see deeds, we need to see actions. And by the way, why don't you start with strengthening the Voting Rights Act? That was Tuesday at 3 p.m. Thursday morning at 8, Leonard Lance was on the radio. He's a follower. He said, I think when we get back to Congress, we should look at strengthening the Voting Rights Act. This was from a man who wouldn't know a voting right if it hit him in the face. But he certainly read my statement. That was pretty clear. He's done that to me 2 other times. Leonard Lance is a follower, and that's one of his biggest shortcomings. This district deserves a leader. I've been a leader in almost everything I've done in my life, and I will lead for you as well and fight for you in Congress, something, again, I think we've all said he does not do. A couple of things that he does effectively. He's a strong supporter of Israel, and I think that's important. I work for an Israeli bank. I have a lot of Israeli friends. I think that's very important. What else he does really well is gets on MSNBC and pretends, or tries to pretend, to be a moderate. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I announced my candidacy on MSNBC with Joy Reid on Mother's Day. We will go up against him on MSNBC anytime he wants. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to combine another couple of questions because they're also a little related. So, what would your legislative priorities be? And what are your concrete strategies to achieve them? And if you were to win, how are you going to push your agenda and work with the Republicans? What are you willing to compromise on? 4 minutes. Maybe we could start somewhere else. Lisa, can you start?
What direction?
Lisa, then Tom, Goutam will go that way.
Shaking things up. All right. Same issues I've been talking about over and over and over again. First is the economy. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Investing in infrastructure. They go together. If we invest in infrastructure, it will attract more businesses to New Jersey. It will allow us in New Jersey to commute around the state and out of the state. Building infrastructure creates jobs. It puts union workers to work. We need to be investing in jobs, but we also need to be focused on closing the gender wage gap. I was so happy yesterday when Phil Murphy's very first executive order was an effort to close the pay equity gap. I applaud him, but that needs to be done on a federal issue because the pay disparity affects families. We need to fight to make sure that every American has access to quality, affordable health care. And that means that women need access to reproductive care. Leonard Lance is so bad on that issue. We also, lost my place. Healthcare. Look, we've got to drive costs down. There are concrete ways to do that. Allowing Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices. We need to instate a reinsurance program so that insurance companies can afford to cover the older and sicker Americans. I'm going to be willing to work across the aisle. Look, we all recognize that the ACA is not perfect, and I'm happy to work and make sure that we come up with a system that does work. But I will not compromise when it comes to making sure that every American has access to quality, affordable health care. The third issue that I feel really strongly about, which is near and dear to my heart, is education. We need to be supporting our educators. We need to make college more affordable. That means allowing student loans to be renegotiated if interest rates go down. And we need to make sure that students who choose not to go on to a four-year college, that we invest in vocational and technical training in our public high schools and our two-year colleges. This country is facing some real problems. We need real solutions. We need to stop seeing the grandstanding and partisanship that is going on down in Washington. We need to change the face of Washington, and people need to go down there ready to roll up our sleeves, get to work, and get the people's work done in Washington. And that's what I intend to do.
So, how do we get things done in Washington, and what are we prepared to compromise on? About, 15, 16 years ago, I was a human rights activist working to try to protect our country's values. We had just been hit by terrorists on September 11th. People were afraid. People were willing to rally around their president, President Bush, even when he took steps that were not consistent with our values. We started waterboarding people. We became guilty of things that we used to condemn our enemies for. And I took on that fight. It wasn't popular at first, even within the Democratic Party, because again, we were afraid. We were nervous about being perceived as weak. So what did we do? I followed an approach that I think I would follow on just about every difficult, controversial issue. I found both Democratic and Republican allies. And ultimately, our main champion in that effort was Senator John McCain, who had experienced torture of his own as a prisoner of war. We found unlikely allies outside the US government. We built a coalition of retired military leaders who believed that what their president was doing was wrong. We used the media effectively. I was probably on nightly news every 2 or 3 weeks, and at first I would get hammered, but after a year or two, I could tell that the tone of the questioning changed because our campaign was working. And in the end, we passed that torture ban with almost every single Republican and Democrat in the Congress on our side. And by the way, another thing we did was we found a bill that was definitely going to pass. Most bills that are introduced in Congress never go anywhere. But if you attach your idea to a bill like an appropriations bill or a defense bill that is going to pass, you can win. Now, if I'm elected, my first priority, and I think a lot of us have this in common, would be to repeal and replace this tax bill that is doing so much harm to families in New Jersey. How can we do it? It's not going to be easy because Republicans, they fought hard for this bill. They were even willing to lose the 2018 elections over this bill. Trump will be against anything that we want to do to change this. One of the first things that I will do is I will propose to all the other freshman Democrats who were elected in 2018, to that freshman class, that we get together in a retreat 1 week after the election to try to come up with our tax reform plan, because we don't just want to repeal this, we need to replace it. We do need tax reform in this country. We will find the unlikely Republican supporters, those who are deficit hawks, those who share our conviction that adding $1.5 trillion to the deficit is a terrible idea. It's economic malpractice. And we will negotiate hard, and we will fight hard, and we will do this in a bipartisan way in the United States Congress, whether Donald Trump likes it or not. And in that process, yeah, I'd be willing to compromise on some things. We can talk about where the corporate tax rate should be. We can include some Republican ideas in a bill like that. What I will not compromise on is when the fundamental values of this country are attacked. I will not compromise in the face of racism. I will not compromise in the face of efforts to kick people out of this country who have lived here and started businesses here and raised their children here for decades. I will not compromise when the President of the United States attacks the independence of our law enforcement institutions upon which our democracy depends. So that would be my approach.
questions are working with Republicans and legislative priority. So when I spoke earlier about Robbie Tolan's case that we had in the United States Supreme Court, we won that case unanimously. It was a 9-0 decision. At a time when the majority of the court is appointed by Republicans, the majority of Republican justices on that court. Now this was a case about race, it was about police brutality, it was about excessive force and violence, and we said all of those things in our papers. But the lower courts had thrown out Robbie's case. They said, you don't even get to go to trial. You won't even have your day in court. So we made an additional argument in our papers. We said, at a minimum, whatever you think about all those issues, and by the way, we highlighted them. We worked with the NAACP, who put in a brief supporting our side to shed light on those important issues. But we said, at a minimum, you've got to agree that Robbie is entitled to a day in court. And we won on that argument. At the time of our case, Justice John Roberts had never once on the court ruled against a police officer. Justice Samuel Alito, in his entire time on the court, had never once ruled against a police officer. And if we forced them to write a decision that said, yes or no, are you pro-police officer, I think we lose that debate. We gave them a way to agree with us without compromising their principles. We gave them a way to agree with us without compromising their principles. As a litigator, I negotiated every single day with people who were paid by their clients for the sole purpose of disagreeing with me. And the way we engaged in those negotiations is to find that common ground, to figure out where is that argument that at a minimum Robbie should have his day in court. Where is that path where you can say, how can we agree on something in a way that doesn't require you to violate your core principles? Because we won't negotiate. Certainly I won't negotiate on my principles. We'll negotiate about tactics. When I was going around to all the towns in the district, I met Ramses, right next door in Somerville. Ramses is a dreamer. He came to this country when he was 3 years old. He's been here for 18 years. He has a job. He pays taxes. He has no record. He's in school. He's a model American in every meaningful sense of that word. We absolutely need a Clean Dream Act. Now, when DACA was implemented, the fee was about $495. We can negotiate whether it should be $450, $500, $550. There are things around the edges we can negotiate on. We don't negotiate on our principles. My number one legislative priority, if I'm elected to Congress, is absolutely getting rid of this terrible tax bill and delivering real tax reform to the middle class. There are a lot of things we need to do, absolutely. Get rid of the SALT deduction elimination. I would make all education expenses fully tax deductible. That's colleges, but it's trade schools, vocational programs, apprenticeships. And I would pay for that, and there are a variety of ways to pay for it, but here's my favorite. When corporations break the law, they pay fines, penalties, and settlements to the government. And then they get a tax break on the money that they paid to the government for breaking the law. I would shut that down on day one and put that money into education. My law professor, Elizabeth Warren, has introduced a bill called the Truth in Settlements Act, which is intended to shut this down. I support that bill, and I would co-sponsor or similar legislation in the future. But there's one more thing. It's time to aim high. We're at a moment where the playing field on all of these issues is tilted. I propose Democracy 2.0, an upgrade to the Constitution. 3 constitutional amendments that we need right now. Number 1, real campaign finance reform that says corporations are not people and money is not speech. Number 2, a privacy amendment that gives all individuals a right to privacy in their personal information and private lives. And number 3, a voting rights amendment that guarantees all citizens the right to vote without interference from voter suppression and gerrymandering. It's time to aim high.
Folks, I gotta be honest with you, and this has to be said and understood. We've been compromising for the past 8 years in Washington. We got cap and trade instead of carbon fee and dividend. We got the Affordable Care Act, which was based on Romney Care, which was based on Nixon Care, and the Heritage Foundation run by the Koch brothers are the ones who put in the individual mandate. The same Koch brothers who are trying to shove this tax plan and deny the realities of climate change. We need to be brave and bold. What we deserve is a government responsive to the people and a government that is of by and for the people. It is no wonder why that we faced all this. The fact that under Scott Walker. The Democrats didn't show up for teachers and public employees when they were trying to shove state rights down everybody's throat. Where was the Democratic Party? Did we forget the words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Be brave and bold. They hate me," referring to the special interest, "but I welcome their hatred." We need to be brave and bold. And that is why our campaign has put forward what I like to call the People's Platform. This is what we need to do, because if you care about America, you care that your income determines how you live, but it should not determine if you live. Martin Luther King once said, "What's the point of having an integrated lunch counter if you cannot afford a hamburger and a cup of coffee at that counter?" We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour now. I'm glad Phil Murphy is behind it, but we need to do it nationally as well. If you care about America, you care that medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are Democrats. We need to be brave and bold. We need a Medicare for all system. I'm so tired of hearing of this half-assed approach we call the public option that is not going to work, folks. The Congressional Budgeting Office, along with several foundations, have clearly stated that it is not going to work. Barack Obama understood this back in 2008 and did not allow it to be put into the ACA to begin with, because the insurance companies are going to dump everybody who they do not want to cover onto it, and it's going to be a complete failure. We need to address the pressing issues of climate change. Arctic drilling was not going to work. We need carbon-free and dividend. We need to get out renewable. We need 100% renewables by 2036. And that's why I support Jeff Merkley and Tulsi Gabbard's bill. We could do all these wonderful things, but the thing that is lacking is the will and the knowledge of where our country came from. The reason any of us are sitting here today and in this room is because the hard work of individuals like MLK, Susan B. Anthony, FDR, LBJ, and JFK. They built the Democratic Party, and we take all that for granted today. Folks, the time is limited, and the stakes are too high to settle for anything less than progressive policies.
I think one could argue that there's not much bolder or more progressive than electing more women to Congress. Women in Congress are the ones who have gotten a few things done while we've had stagnation and obstinance the last 7 years in Congress. But my legislative priorities would be the following. Healthcare is one of them. As a healthcare, I started my career as a healthcare statistician. My master's degree, I actually have a public policy analysis degree, and I concentrated in healthcare policy. My father was an executive for the New York State Health Department. My mom's a nurse. Always was a topic at our dinner table. I believe strongly that the Medicare public option needs to be on the exchanges. Medicare is one of the most efficient health insurance programs in our country, if not the world. The infrastructure exists. I talked about technology earlier. The technology infrastructure exists, and this is something that we can easily lever out to the exchanges where it is needed, to hold our insurance companies accountable and to make sure that our products are well delivered to our constituents. There are health economists, including my former advisor in graduate school, who are already working on pricing Medicare as a public option, and I think that's really important. The other thing that's really important, I think, is improving our economy so that it works for all. We already talked about repealing the GOP tax scam, but I would argue that our economy won't work for everyone until we have criminal justice reform. We have essentially a half a generation of young men in this country that have been put away and not allowed to develop skills and build an economic future for them and their families. And I think it's really important that we used to have this bipartisan agreement. We need to bring that back, and we need criminal justice reform. Finally, climate change, to me, is an existential issue. If any of you have been to Miami recently, there are apartment buildings in Miami where the parking lots flood on a regular basis. This never used to happen. We all know, you've probably read about the work that's being done in New York City to protect Manhattan from climate change. We're talking billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars. This is an existential issue. I happen to live on a hill in Berkeley Heights. We occasionally joke, a really sick joke, that we're going to have waterfront property someday. This is an existential issue. We need to go back to the Paris Accords. I respect all of the governors and mayors that are focused on continuing their plans to combat climate change. We also, as part of that, we can incentivize clean energy technology, which will also drive jobs. So those are some of my priorities. In terms of compromise, I will compromise. Not on principles, but on details, sure. I mentioned the Medicare public option. I'd love to have it on all the exchanges. But if my Republican counterparts come to me and say, look, we kind of like the idea, but we'd like to try it, how about we put it on the 10 exchanges where they really don't have a lot of competition? I'd be willing to start with that. Because while bold ideas are important, so is getting something done. And I will not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm glad that we have people in our party who are pushing us. But in the meantime, we need to get things done. That means working with our Republican counterparts and coming up with plans that we can actually implement and make work, like putting the Medicare public option on the exchanges and actually moving forward, even if it is incrementally, moving forward. That is what's important here.
My top priority is achieving a bipartisan solution to the healthcare situation. I said before that I helped get Mike McMahon elected from Staten Island. I then worked in his office back in 2009 on healthcare policy, right when we introduced the Affordable Care Act. So I have to respectfully disagree with what Peter said. The reason we didn't have a public option was not because of President Obama. He strongly supported it. The reason we didn't have it was entirely because of Joe Lieberman. If it wasn't for that, though, we would have had a public option back then, and that's what we need to do next. A public option, what it does, for those of you who don't know, a public option is essentially Medicare that anyone can buy into, just like you would with your private insurance. What it does is it forces the private carriers to actually compete. They're going to have to reduce some of their waste and inefficiency if they want to survive. That means lower premiums, lower deductibles, and more benefits for everyone. That has to be, I think, our first priority. And I think at this time, that's something that we will be able to get some bipartisan support around that we couldn't get last time, but I think we'll be able to get this time. Second priority is our infrastructure. I mentioned before that we have 42% of New Jersey's roads are considered deficient. We have about 20,000 people that commute into the city every day. We have 4 train lines. We need to build the Gateway Project and other tunnels going into the city. We have water pipelines, as I said, that were built between 1890 and 1930, or here in New Jersey. Our energy grid it was built in the 1950s and 1960s. It's operating at max capacity. We need to invest $1 trillion into our infrastructure. Every billion that we invest can create up to 13,000 new jobs. Those are good paying, middle class jobs, the kind that lifted us out of the Great Depression, won us World War II, and set the United States on course to be the economic superpower of the 20th century. Right now, we are seeing, even the Republicans are saying we desperately need to upgrade our infrastructure. That's something we can work on them with. Now, there are things that we can negotiate. For example, they want to put more of that money into private businesses that will contract out the work. I want to put more of the money, have the federal government running the program, just like we did during the Great Depression. We can negotiate that. Those are the details. Those are the things that we can work on. The last big thing is student debt. The average class of 2016 graduate has about $40,000 of student debt. They're supposed to pay it off in about 10 years. But what we're seeing is that's actually going to take them twice as long, 20 years to pay it off. That's going to cripple their choice of careers, their ability to buy a car, buy a house, start a family, all those things that we need them to do so they can live a better life than their parents did, they're not going to be able to do. So what I proposed is dramatically expanding AmeriCorps. And what I want to do is I want to have students come home after college and give them the option that if they come home and work for 2 years for a reduced wage, they can have their student loans totally forgiven. I want our students coming home and feeding the hungry and sheltering the homeless. I want them to come home and help solve the problems of America. We can raise up a whole new generation of Americans, and I think we can get enough Republicans on board to make it actually happen.
I've worked with Republicans
I've worked against Republicans. I've worked with Democrats. I've worked against Democrats when they've been proposing lousy ideas like a nuclear bailout that the Senate President Sweeney just did. So I'm hardly a neophyte. I go where the action is. I have my core progressive views, but I'm also recognizing as a freshman legislator, you can only get so much done. You're going to have to react to what's put in front of you. But I know how to fight. I've been doing it for 30 years. I'm one of the lead organizers or plaintiffs against Governor Christie and Exxon for their horrible deal, pennies on the dollar, where they wanted an $8 billion settlement. They were going to settle for $225 million and a lot less than that. We're suing. We delayed it. Now we have a new governor who can change course, and so I think we just saved ourselves in New Jersey about a few $1 billion. We also got a constitutional amendment passed this past November that said, at the very least, whatever settlement it's going to be, the money's going to go to the environment. It's not going to go to the general fund and pay off mismanagement by the state. I helped get the Christie book deal stopped last year. That also was tied to legislation that would undermine a free press here in New Jersey. That was a Democratic and a Republican effort against and for. Highlands, Clean Car, the Global Warming Response Act are major laws I helped get passed. They were bipartisan effort that required us to work across the aisle. There were compromises we accepted that we really didn't like, but we decided at that moment in time half a loaf was better than no loaf, and we thought at the time that it really was that option of no loaf. A whole loaf was not on the table. But we continue to fight to this day to get more of that loaf. In terms of priorities, I think, again, the 4 E's, energy, education, the environment, and the economy. They all go together when it comes to climate change. Property rights, public health, science and education, jobs, consumer savings, public safety, environmental justice, infrastructure, mass transit are all tied up into that. If we invest in 100% clean energy, we get the jobs and we address a lot of those issues all at once. But ultimately, we are always going to be struggling more than we need to as long as Citizens United stands and as long as most of us are spending too much time dialing for dollars instead of having public financing of campaigns. There are some things we can do in the short term to make it voluntarily, but ultimately we need better judges and we need constitutional amendments, and that's going to take time. So we'll fight the fight what we can in front of us in the short term while also fighting in the long term. And at that, I'll just leave it there. Not get caught.
Since we're running out of time, we'd like to thank all the candidates for coming tonight. But for their closing statement, I had asked them to do something a little different. I had asked them to imagine themselves canvassing, knocking on doors, and somebody opens the door and they have a minute to convince this person to vote for them. What are you going to say to this person, moderate, independent, Democrat, to vote for you? Linda?
So what I'm finding when I do talk to voters is they are tired of not being listened to. So I think when I go to the door, I ask them, what do they care about? What issues are important to them? And then share with them why those issues are also important to me and what I will do for those issues when I'm elected to Congress. I will also share with them my directness. I will tell them that I'm direct. And while in business as a woman, that's not always the best thing, I think as a congressperson, particularly following one who's never been direct with his constituents, being direct is really important to people. This is about saying, meaning what I say, saying what I mean, but it's also about being able to translate what's happening in Washington to constituents' lives here in the district and vice versa. And that's what I would talk with people about when I was at the door.
So I'll just tell you what I told voters this morning when I was out canvassing in Greenbrook here in Somerset County. When I would knock on the door and they would ask me, they would say, well, why should I vote for you? And I would only have a second before they would close the door again. And here's what I'd say. It was snowing this morning. I said, it's snowing. There's 6 months until the election. And I've been out here knocking on doors and talking to voters like you for the past 6 months, since this past summer. And I think that's what we need here in Washington, down in Washington. We need someone with that single-minded focus that is going to be just completely determined and focused to get what we need for the people here in the district, that they're going to go do whatever they need to do, and they're going to knock on as many doors as they need to do to get it.
I'd say do your homework. Look at my record. I haven't been just walking the walk in this campaign or in this last year of resistance. I've been not just talking the talk, but walking the walk my entire adult life, and as a child in this district. Because again, I mentioned my first lit drop was when I was 3 with my father. We were encouraged to talk politics at the dinner table as long as we were respectful and we could justify our argument. So I am grounded in this district. I have my core progressive principles. I have some funky little things I can talk about, like being a trustee of the First Presbyterian Church, which isn't the first thing you would think of when you think of liberal David Pringle. I have led Boy Scout treks to New Mexico. I am proud to have helped fight to get the Boy Scouts into the 21st century when it comes to gay rights. So look at my record. I am a proud product of the public schools. My children are too. I got to go to Princeton. My daughters and my son have academic scholarships to college. God bless Megan. She's going to be going to Ghana and the Peace Corps next year. So I walk the walk, I talk the talk, I raise my family that way, and I look forward to bringing it to Leonard Lance in the fall.
So I'll introduce myself. I'm Lisa Mandelblatt, and I'm running for Congress. And then I'm going to ask them what they're concerned about. I think the problem we have is we've been talking at people. We've had our congressman talk at us and tell us what he thinks is important. It's time for us to start listening to what you think is important. And I appreciate you all coming and listening to all of us. But I cannot wait to continue on this listening tour that I've been doing, putting 8,000 miles on my car, probably doing 75 different meet and greet type things in all different size forums. And that's what matters. We woke up in 2016. We woke up the morning after the election with a realization that we had elected a man who was an insult to women, people of color, and hardworking immigrants. And I am going to do everything to reverse that.
At risk of being repetitive, I will say that we do a lot of talking in this campaign. We spent the entire time with you today trying to persuade you that we might be good candidates to beat Leonard Lance and to be effective members of Congress. And what canvassing is about to me is what we don't get enough of a chance to do at these kinds of events, and that's to ask you questions. And that's what I've done when I've canvassed for other candidates, and it's what I look forward to doing as a canvasser for my campaign this spring and this November. So yeah, first you start with a question. How does the tax bill affect you? What is going on in this community? What is Congress not doing for you that might make a difference in your life? And then they want to know about me. Cookie, you asked for 2 sentences. So I'll say I'm a guy who stood up to dictators like Putin and Kim Jong-un on behalf of our country. I can stand up to this Republican Congress and to Donald Trump on behalf of this district in New Jersey. Thanks.
The question is, what's the magic words that you say in a minute? There are none. There are no magic words. But I'll say this. As part of this campaign, you know, all of us up here, we get these talking points from the Democratic Committee in Washington, and they're fine. David, if you haven't gotten yours, you'll get them soon. They're fine. They're very well written. They're very well researched. And as part of my campaign, though, to go beyond those talking points, I've been talking to thought leaders who are working on the front lines of some issues, and I ask them a question. I say, if I'm elected to Congress, What can I do to help you do your advocacy more effectively? That's what I've asked Amal Sinha, the head of the ACLU, people working in healthcare, on environmental issues, on reproductive rights. That's the question I ask when I knock on doors. If I'm elected to Congress, what can I do to make your life better?
As a social worker, it is an inherited trait to listen to people. But when we go on knock on those doors, we're going to do something radical. That is tell the truth. We make it clear that we are going to fight together to ensure a government that is truly of, by, and for the people. And let me share with you a quick story and why our platform actually works. 2 weeks to election, Leonard Land sent out this mailer. A woman in Westfield saw my father knocking on doors because he had a Peter Jacob for Congress t-shirt on. She gets out of her car, approaches him, says, I need bumper stickers, I need lawn signs, I need palm cards. I saw the mailer, which says, Leonard Land's fiscal conservative, Peter Jacob Bernie Sanders liberal. I'm a Republican, and your son has my vote. Let us work together to ensure a democracy and an economy that works for all of us. Thank you.
We'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you to the candidates. You guys can, mingle and talk to the candidates if you have any questions. Exit is this way because that is the kitchen. Please exit this way. Thank you very much, everybody.
That's exactly why I went to law school, because I can't figure that stuff out. Oh, smart, okay.
Don't be scared.